Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us. Today we are going to be tackling some pretty controversial comments made by former Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra. He made some remarks about beauty and race that have really kind of set off a firestorm in Thailand.
Yeah.
And you won't believe what his daughter has had to say in his defense. But before we get into all that,
Sure.
why don't we start with like a quick overview of this situation?
Yeah, that sounds great. I think it's important to give everyone the context before we dive into the really fascinating stuff here. What's really interesting about this incident is that it's not just about some political gaffe or misstep. This actually touches on some really deep and complex issues, like how different cultures perceive beauty, and how the media portrays beauty, and even how we as a global society talk about race
Yeah.
in this day and age. It's really a lot to unpack, but that's what we're here for, right?
Exactly. We love getting into the nitty-gritty, and I know our listeners do too. So let's set the stage here. Thaksin was speaking at a political rally in Chiang Rai, and as you know, he was encouraging Thai women to embrace their natural beauty and even consider modeling careers.
Right. It seemed harmless enough at first glance, promoting confidence and body positivity. But then he went on to say, and I'm quoting directly here from the Bangkok Post, African people who have black skin and flat noses that make it difficult to breathe are hired for millions of bahts to be models. Thai people look much better. There's no need for our people to get nose job or breast augmentation.
Whoa, okay, yeah, that definitely took a turn.
Yeah.
And as you can imagine, those comments sparked some pretty immediate backlash. Senator Onkana Nilapajit, who's a really prominent human rights advocate in Thailand, she came out and strongly condemned Thaksin's remarks, calling them racist and demanding a public apology.
Yeah, and this story even went international right away. Outlets like the Thai Post were all over it.
It's like everyone was watching, waiting to see what would happen next.
Exactly. And you have to remember that Thailand is currently trying to join the UN Human Rights Council. And they've made some very specific promises about upholding human rights and combating discrimination. So this whole incident put those pledges in the spotlight.
Yeah, big time talk about bad timing.
And, it raised some serious questions on the world stage about whether Thailand is truly committed to those promises.
Right. It definitely doesn't look good. But now Thaksin's daughter, Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra, has stepped in to defend her father.
Right.
She's insisting that his comments were never meant to be racist.
Yeah, she's been very clear about that. She's adamant that her father's words have been completely misinterpreted. She says he was just trying to encourage Thai women to be proud of their natural beauty and, to resist the pressure to get these really expensive and sometimes even dangerous cosmetic procedures.
So it sounds like Paetongtarn is saying her father's intentions were good, but his delivery maybe not so much.
That's one way to put it. But this actually brings up a really important question, and it's something we see debated a lot. Can a comment still be offensive even if the speaker didn't mean for it to be?
Right, and how does someone's culture or background play into all of this?
Exactly. I mean, what one culture considers offensive, another might not even bat an eye at.
It's definitely complicated.
It really highlights how complex communication can be, especially when you're dealing with topics like race and beauty standards.
It's, like you said earlier, there's a lot to unpack here. So we've got Thaksin's controversial comments, the immediate backlash, and then Paetongtarn coming to her father's defense. All this happened in just a matter of days. Where do we even go from here?
Well, I think the next step is to try to understand what's happening beneath the surface. What's going on beyond just the words themselves. I think Thaksin's comments, regardless of his intention, tap into some pre-existing beauty standards in Thailand.
That's a really interesting point.
Mm-hmm.
So he might have accidentally revealed some deeper societal issues.
Exactly, and I think those are definitely worth exploring. We need to look at how his statements reflect or maybe even reinforce the pressure that Thai women face to conform to these very specific and often very narrow ideals of beauty.
And that pressure can be intense, right? We've seen it in cultures all over the world.
Oh, absolutely. The constant pursuit of a certain look can lead to feelings of inadequacy and sometimes even drive people to pretty extreme measures like cosmetic surgery.
Which is kind of ironic considering Thaksin seemed to be discouraging that very thing in his speech.
It is pretty ironic, isn't it? It's almost like he was accidentally advocating for the problem he was trying to address.
It's amazing how a single event like this can trigger such a multi-layered discussion.
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion, right? There's always something deeper going on.
Exactly. And, this situation also connects to a much broader global conversation about representation in the fashion industry. We're seeing more and more calls for diversity on the runway and challenging those old Eurocentric beauty norms that have been around for so long.
Right. It's like the world is finally starting to wake up to the fact that beauty comes in all shapes, sizes, and colors.
And so even if Thaksin meant his comments to be a compliment towards Thai women. Some people might argue that he actually ended up reinforcing a very limited view of beauty by making these comparisons.
Yeah, that's a valid point. And I think it just goes to show that even when our intentions are good, the words we choose can sometimes have unintended consequences, especially when we're talking about sensitive topics like appearance.
We have to be really careful about the language we use. So where does all this leave us? We've got a controversial statement, strong reactions, a passionate defense, and now we're talking about global beauty standards. This is turning into a really fascinating deep dive.
This is just the tip of the iceberg. Stay tuned, because next we're going to explore the potential consequences of Thaksin's comments, both for him personally and for Thailand's reputation on the world stage, and then we'll examine the broader cultural context surrounding these issues. It's going to get even more interesting, I promise. It's amazing how much power words can have, especially when they come from someone as influential as a former prime minister.
Right. It's like whatever they say, people are going to listen. And even a casual comment can end up causing a big stir.
Yeah.
So how is Thailand reacting to all this?
Well, it's definitely not a simple answer. You've got some people who are just furious about Thaksin's comments. They're calling him out for being racist and saying that he's really damaging Thailand's image on the world stage.
Yeah, especially with them trying to get on the UN Human Rights Council. We talked about those promises they made about human rights.
Exactly. Those pledges were all about eliminating discrimination and promoting equality. So when he made these comments, it directly contradicted everything they'd been saying. And it made other countries wonder if Thailand is actually serious about those promises.
I bet some people are even saying Thailand should be kicked out of the running for the council until they get their act together.
No, absolutely. There are definitely some critics who are calling for Thailand's bid to be suspended. But then, on the other hand, you've got some people in Thailand who are a bit more sympathetic to Thaksin.
So are they just ignoring the controversy altogether?
Not really. It's a lot more nuanced than that. Some people are looking at his comments through a cultural lens, like maybe in Thailand, certain things that are considered offensive in other parts of the world just aren't a big deal there. They're arguing that people in Thailand talk about physical features more directly, and it's not meant to be hurtful.
So they're saying his intentions were different based on their cultural background.
Right. And then you've got people who are really focused on his intentions, just like his daughter. They truly believe that he was trying to be positive and just messed up with his wording.
So we've got this one event that's revealing all these different opinions and ways of thinking. It's pretty amazing.
It really shows how important it is to consider cultural context and how different people interpret things, especially when we're dealing with sensitive topics.
It definitely makes the whole situation a lot more interesting and complex.
For sure. It's not just a black and white issue.
Okay, but let's step back for a minute and think about the bigger picture. What does this whole thing tell us about how race and beauty are viewed in Thailand?
That's a great question. I think it suggests that there's a lot going on beneath the surface. Whether he meant to or not, Thaksin's comments revealed certain ideas about beauty that value some features more than others.
Like when he said flat noses are undesirable?
Right. He sort of accidentally exposed these deeply rooted biases that exist in a lot of societies.
So how do these beauty standards actually affect people in Thailand?
Well, for a long time, light skin has been seen as better than dark skin. It goes back to when people with darker skin were often laborers who worked outside. And so having lighter skin became associated with having more money and higher social status.
Wow. So it's like a historical thing.
Yeah. And even today, you see skin whitening products everywhere, and people go out of their way to avoid getting a tan.
It sounds like there's a whole industry built around these ideas.
Oh, absolutely. And then there's also this pressure to look more Western, which means people might get surgery to change their eyelids or their noses, like Thaksin mentioned.
That's so ironic. He was telling women to be happy with their natural beauty, but then he accidentally reinforced these Western beauty standards.
I know, right?
Oh.
It's a really complicated situation. I think it just proves that even when you're trying to be positive, your words can have unintended effects. And when it's someone powerful, like a former prime minister speaking, those effects can be amplified.
So this whole thing is about more than just Thaksin's words. It's about how power and language intersect with ideas about beauty and appearance.
Exactly. And it connects to this broader issue of representation, not just in Thailand, but all over the world. We need to ask ourselves who gets to decide what's beautiful and whose features are valued.
And those are questions that the fashion industry, the media, and really all of us as a society need to address.
Yeah, it's not about being politically correct. It's about recognizing that beauty comes in many forms, and we have to challenge those narrow ideas about beauty that have been around for so long.
And that means being open to listening to diverse perspectives and understanding different experiences.
Absolutely. This isn't just a Thai problem, it's a global conversation.
This is a great example of how one seemingly small incident can open up all these important and complex issues.
It really makes this a deep dive fascinating.
Okay, so now that we've talked about all this, where do we go from here? What are the consequences for Thaksin and for Thailand in general?
Well, that's what we're going to look at next. Stay tuned because we'll be discussing the political fallout, the impact on Thailand's global image, and the potential for real change.
Wow. It's crazy how a simple comment about beauty turned into this huge discussion about all these different things. We've talked about intent versus impact and cultural differences and Thailand's place in the world. It's been a wild ride.
Yeah. It really has. And you know what's interesting is that even though Paetongtarn was defending her father, she accidentally highlighted this important issue. The pressure that Thai women face to fit into these beauty standards.
Right. It's like this controversy has unintentionally started a conversation about body image and unrealistic beauty standards.
Yeah.
Not just in Thailand, but everywhere.
Definitely. This is a conversation that we need to have because these pressures are everywhere. It doesn't matter who you are or where you're from. We're always seeing these images that tell us what beauty is supposed to look like.
And a lot of times those images are unrealistic and unattainable.
Exactly. And it can be really harmful.
You know, maybe this whole controversy could actually lead to something good in Thailand. Maybe it'll force people to be more open and honest about beauty standards and how they affect people.
I think you're right. Sometimes it takes something controversial to shake things up and create real change.
It's like a wake-up call.
Exactly.
And for our listeners out there who might be feeling a little overwhelmed by all this, I think it's important to remember that we can use critical thinking to make sense of it all.
Absolutely. It's easy to get caught up in the emotion of it all and jump to conclusions, but it's important to step back and try to see things from different perspectives.
And that's really what this deep dive has been all about, giving you the information and the different viewpoints so you can form your own opinions.
We've looked at the reactions, the political and cultural background, and the possible outcomes.
Now, as we wrap up, we want to leave you with something to think about.
Imagine that this incident does spark a more meaningful conversation about race, beauty, and representation in Thailand and around the world. What direction would you want that conversation to go in? What would you want to see happen?
That's a really great question to consider. It's not just about what's happened, but what we want the future to look like.
This deep dive has been a journey, and we're so glad you came along with us. Remember, knowledge is power when we understand it and use it. So keep thinking about these things and keep the conversation going.
We'll see you next time for another deep dive. Until then, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep thinking critically.